Okay, and we're live. Guys, thank you very much for joining us today for this chat. I've been meaning to have this chat from sort of a different perspective, because if you're like me, and if you're on social media, and if you're on YouTube, and if you're watching all the hottest of hot takes all over the place about Iran, about the sort of potential conflict between the United States and Iran, the takes are hot, and they're often very alarmist. They're often takes that are either asking for war, or they're asking for, that they're prostrating before the Iranian regime and asking for forgiveness and all of that stuff. So to help us make a little bit of sense of everything, I thought it'll be good to get an Iranian perspective. So he's been living in Canada for a while, but he's of Iranian origin, and he's someone that understands the situation in Iran well. So I'm very pleased to welcome for the first time to the show, Armin Navabi. Armin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. So before we really get into, what comes next and what this Soleimani sort of strike means for the region and for the world in general, if you could just recount some of the sequence of events that took place that led to the strike on Soleimani for the audience first.
Right. So there's two ways of looking at this. Either long-term history on what led to this, like going back more than 40 years, right?
It's or a podcast, man. Take as much time as you want.
And the second way of looking at it is the most recent event on how it led to this event, like the tit for tat that happened to between United States and Iran until it escalated to the killing of Soleimani and then the missile attacks. But do you want me to give some, because I think what a lot of people don't have is the knowledge, the background knowledge, the hostility between the different players in the region and the alliances, and without that background knowledge, it's really hard to make sense of things, right? So if you wanna just step a little bit back in history to see how. Okay, that sounds good. All right, so most people I think know 1979, the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Khomeini came to power after thousands of years of Iran being ruled by kings. For the first time in the history of Iran had no king, right? This was an extraordinary thing. Like this is a country with a longer history than most other countries, and it always had a dynasty, like a monarchs running it, until Khomeini came and toppled the Pahlavi dynasty before the Islamic Republic of Iran, right? But the thing is that the ideology behind Khomeini's Islamic Revolution, which, by the way, he hijacked the revolution. The revolution originally was not an Islamic revolution. But the ideology behind, his version of Shia Islam was something called the Velayat Faqih. And this ideology and this movement, this revolution, was not something that was meant to be Iranian at all. Something that people don't understand about Khomeini himself is that Khomeini was not at all patriotic in any way. In fact, he hated mentioning Iran or like celebrating Iran or any kind of nationalism. He was against it, right? And for a leader of your country to have that attitude, a lot of people find that weird. But for Khomeini, this was about Islam. It had nothing. It was not about Iran at all. In fact, he had a famous quote on his way back from exile from Paris back to Tehran after the victory of the Islamic Revolution. The reporters on the plane asked him, what is he feeling being able to go back to his country, back to Iran? And he said he feels nothing. Even though Khomeini was against nationalism, shortly after the revolution, the Iran-Iraq war forced the hand of the government to start using nationalism as well. Because even though Khomeini was not very patriotic, and I know I'm using nationalism and patriotic interchangeably, and I know there's a difference, but I'm just going to use it interchangeably for this show. Khomeini himself was not patriotic at all, but the Iranian people are extremely patriotic on average, right? And they needed to, as you know, Shia Islam was not good enough to go to war with Saddam. They kind of had to tap into that sense of nationalism, not just religion, to be able to get the millions of volunteers that they got to go to war with Saddam, right? So that's, they kind of created a new version of Islamic nationalism, even though Khomeini did not like that. But the dream of Khomeini, the goal of Khomeini, was not to have this Islamic revolution in Iran. This was supposed to be taking over all the Islamic world. Like, the borders of Iran was not where this Islamic revolution was meant to stop at all, right? And I'm not going to go into too much detail about the efforts of Khomeini himself while he was alive to export the revolution, as they say, outside of Iran's border. But he died and none of that came true, right? He managed to win the Islamic revolution in Iran, but the only success that he had outside of the borders of Iran was mostly in Lebanon with Hezbollah against Israel, right? But mostly not other places. But during Khamenei's time, after Khomeini, who came into power, became their supreme religious leader in Iran. What happened was United States came and gave a gift to Iran by removing Saddam from power, right? So while Saddam was in power, during the war and after the war between Iran and Iraq, Iran had invested heavily in building networks and building its, creating roots for its ideology in Iraq, which is majority Shia. You see, majority Shia doesn't necessarily mean that you support Velayat Faqih, which is the kind of Shia Islam that is loyal to Khamenei and Khomeini, basically loyal back to Tehran. Right. But it provides the fertile ground for creating Velayat Faqih version of Shia Islam, right? So if you have Shia, that's a great place for Iran to start investing. And Iran had invested in building those networks for many years before United States came in and just removed Saddam. And now Iran was ready to go in and take advantage of all the networks and all the resources and all the roots that he had there. And it was amazing because I remember when Saddam was removed, I was watching the news and there was like cameras. This was a little bit after Saddam was removed, but there was cameras in Baghdad and they were putting pictures of Khomeini and Khamenei in Baghdad. Wow. And I could not believe that. I was like, Khomeini himself tried for 8 years to even get an inch from Iraq, and he couldn't. And overnight, like, they just, like, I know I'm exaggerating, but overnight they just like did it in Baghdad. Yeah. Khomeini's posters are being raised in Baghdad. Like, if Khomeini was alive to see this, this was his dream. This was his dream. And it was, so ever since then, Iran's influence in the region has grown significantly. Right? If you look at Iran's influence in the Middle East and around the Middle East, Iran has, and a lot of people think we were exaggerating, but then we were proven right when we said Iran has close to complete control over Iraq's government. Iran has control over 1/3 of Lebanon's government, arguably more, given that the military, in Lebanon, the people with the guns are Hezbollah, so that's the part that matters. They saved Assad, and Assad now owns his life to Iran. So they are controlling and aiding and the Houthis in Yemen. So basically, they also have secret ties to Shias in Bahrain. They try to create uprisings against the government in Bahrain. And the most scariest to Saudi Arabia, close after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, was them even trying to reach out to Shias in Saudi Arabia. Right. And okay, so Saudi Arabia is majority Sunni, but the Shia part of Saudi Arabia is where all the oil is. And this is why after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Saudi Arabia has been, petrified ever since. Like, they have been, this has been a 40-year-old nightmare for Saudi Arabia. And right after the Islamic Revolution, when Iran started investing in spreading its Vilayat Faqih version of Islam all over the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, because they were scared, and a lot of people don't know this, in 1979, when the Islamic Revolution happened, this inspired a whole bunch of Wahhabis in Mecca to go and attack, and try to capture the Kaaba, and this really started scaring Saudi Arabia. So they had their relationships has been up and down ever since between Iran and Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia, in response to that, started building schools right all over the region. And this is why, for example, if you go into Pakistan, you can see right after 1979 the number of madrasas just took a became extraordinary, astronomically higher compared to before. It was like the numbers are like the Saudis went there and they built like mosques, madrasas.
In India as well. If you look at in India over the past 2 or 3 decades, the number of madrasas they've just kind of skyrocketed too.
Right, and this was in response to Iran. So a lot of people don't notice that the extreme Islamization of Pakistan and all the Wahhabi spreading, in Indonesia, in Bangladesh, in Europe, everywhere. This was in response to trying to copy Iran's model of building networks all everywhere that they want to have an influence.
Right.
The problem is that Saudis really sucked at it. Like what Iran managed to do when they built all these networks everywhere that they want to have an influence, they had the leash on these people. Like these people.
How do you reckon Saudis suck at it? Because they can't control.
Right, because the people that are loyal, the Shias that are loyal to Iran, they would die for Khamenei. They would give their lives for the regime in Iran. But all these ISIS and all these like Al Qaeda people, they got funding from Saudi Arabia. But they are not. They don't like them.
Right.
If they get their hands on Saudi government, they will behead them themselves, right? So the Saudi government created something all over the planet that ended up becoming like a Frankenstein monster. That instead of being like a dog that it could use to hunt other people, it came back for itself, right? So it became a target of its own creation. But Iran managed to create all these networks and managed to have a complete control over it everywhere it wants. So. But again, this is why a lot of people don't notice that all these terrorists, all this ISIS, all this Al Qaeda, it's not just a result of Iran. It's not as simple as just saying this is the factor, right? There's many factors that ended up in the creation of these terrorist networks all around the world. But it was partly in response to Iran's empire building around the Middle East. And again, this is something that a lot of people don't recognize as Iran's imperialism in the Middle East. Because a lot of people, when we talk about Islamic imperialism, they think about Sunni. It's a historic thing. Right. But no, we have now Islamic imperialism is now happening under Shia. What other people I call it Shia imperialism, but other people call it like the Shia crescent. Because if you look how it looks like, Iran is in the middle, and it goes Iraq, Syria, Bahrain, Yemen. It looks like a crescent, right. But the interesting thing is that right in the middle of this crescent is Saudi Arabia. So right. Saudi Arabia is looking like it's being surrounded from everywhere, right? And this is why Saudi Arabia, until recently, wanted to join in with Israel. See, this is how how scary Shias are, because the only thing that managed to bring the Arabs and Israelis together after so many years, it was the Shia. That was the only thing. But both Israel and Saudis wanted to get United States to go to war with Iran until recently, where Iran shot Aramco, which is Saudi Arabia's prized assets. The thing that Saudi Arabia is running out of cash. A lot of people don't know this. They think they have a lot of oil, so they're never going to run out of cash. But they're running out of money, and they're desperate for this IPO of Aramco, which is going to be if it goes the way they like it, it's going to be the most valuable, the most highest valued company in the world once it goes to its IPO. But ever since they plan to go on IPO, because they're desperately in need of cash, there has been one bad news after another, and the valuation of this company has gone down. And then recently, Iran in response to things that we're not going to get into right now,
Sure.
attacked Aramco, and but just a few. See, Saudi Arabia has invested billions, not millions, billions in defense, weapons for protecting, Aramco and other assets, buying it from United States, the most modern advanced weaponry there is, and Iran with investment in drones that were worth tens of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, managed to cripple just a little bit. And this was not the full might of the Iran's military. They went in look, this is what we could do to you. And ever since, Saudi Arabia has been trying to okay, maybe we should be friends with Iran. They are trying to submit to Iran now. They're trying to recognize Iran's hegemony in the region, and they also are begging United States that they have completely changed the tune, because they think if we go into full-on war with Iran, we're there. United States is all the way there, so Iran is going to just go after United States interests, and we don't have the means to defend ourselves. They thought they were very protected with all the weapons that they had, and they're no, we're not. And they're now they're going and kissing the ring of the Khamenei, that they're all begging to let's just get along. And this is the kind of peace again that Iran is interested in, full on submission, but to build
for Iran to be able to achieve this, what I've been hearing from people that have been reporting on Iran for a while, and a lot of them are from Iran too, what they're saying is one of the chief architects of this kind of Iranian domination was Soleimani.
Exactly. This is why I wanted to give you this background to bring up to Soleimani. So Khamenei managed to build this empire, the Shia empire, that it was Khomeini's dream, right? And the person that was doing this for him was Qasem Soleimani. Okay, it's not an exaggeration to say Qasem Soleimani was the second most influential person after the supreme leader himself in Iran. A lot of people think that the president is the top person. He's not. He's nothing. He's just a puppet, right? He's just the figurehead that you put there. He can't do anything without the supreme leader's permission. That's why the democracy in Iran is a fake democracy, right? You basically, and a lot of people in Iran are recognizing that. We vote and we choose a president, and he has nothing. There's nothing he could do. He's not the guy that makes the decisions, right? The decisions come from somewhere else. I mean, the foreign minister, Zarif, he's nothing. He has no influence over Iran's foreign minister, foreign policy, right? He just has to be there to go, the PR person, after decisions are made by people like Qasem Soleimani, right? And in fact, it's interesting because the last time Assad came to Iran, it was very visual, because Assad came to meet, see Iranian officials, and Zarif was not there, right? It was, and he's the foreign minister. It was Qasem Soleimani there that was meeting with him, right? So, and it's interesting because a lot of people are just now being introduced to Qasem Soleimani, and we've been dealing with this guy for a while. But some Westerners, I think, might remember Qasem Soleimani from the meme war he had with Trump. I don't know if you saw the Game of Thrones memes that he sent to Trump, and then Trump responded to that. Those are funny, but that was a while back. So Qasem Soleimani was basically what some people refer to as the Khamenei sword, right? So, and this guy was a lot of people say that he's a top general, but he was way more. He's not just a military guy. He was a policymaker. He made decisions for Kurdistan in Iraq without having to check with Khamenei, right? He made he's responsible for so many historical changes in which direction things are going to go in the Middle East. This guy was, and he seemed like he was omnipresent. He was exactly where he needed to be at the right time, with the exact things that he needed to change history in the benefit for the Islamic Republic back in Iran. Even his enemies admitted to how effective his strategies were. He had fought against ISIS. He had won against ISIS in so many battles that the United States was not even, because Iran was willing to provide the ground troops. I mean, United States keep providing air power, but it's really difficult to win this battle without without ground troop, but two, without the networks, right? Because again, you can send ground troops there, but if you don't know the people, if you don't have the right information, if you don't have the right networks, it's going to be very difficult to win strategically. And they had all these, right? They didn't need to go create them. It was already there for them, right? And this is something that you can't buy with money, because these are people that are ideologically aligned with the mullahs in Tehran, right? So it goes beyond like pay me for information. These people see it their duty to do something like that, and you can't buy that kind of loyalty. And this is something that Saudi Arabia kept trying to do: just throw money at things and hope it will have a good return. And you can't do that, right? This is why religion is so dangerous, because it could do stuff that you could be so effectively brutal and effective with getting people to do your bidding if you just manage to brainwash the right people. Right?
I mean, the sort of, I feel like the sort of, from what you're saying, the circle of influence that Soleimani was able to cultivate in the Middle East was a lot stronger than any kind of influence that the Saudis were able to cultivate in that area through their proxies. Like a lot of the work that Iran is doing in the Middle East is also through proxies, like you just said, through the Houthis, through Hezbollah, through the support to the Shias in Iraq, and through in Syria. Sorry.
Yeah, this is actually very good point, because I remember I was watching like other content creators' take on this,
right.
And I remember I was watching David Pacman, and he said, by the way, I'm not a Trump apologist. I always want to make that clear, because I think, but I'm going to defend Trump's decision on this point specifically.
Okay.
But I'm not a Trump apologist, because I think Trump is a war criminal for defending. Both Trump and Obama are war criminals for supporting Saudi Arabia's war on Yemeni civilians, right? And being responsible for the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time. So I'm not but in this scenario, I think maybe taking out Qasem Soleimani seemed to be like the best of many bad decisions, right? That was the best.
Let's come to it. Let's come to it from the back a little bit, because Soleimani was in the crosshairs of the United States during the Bush administration, during the Obama administration. Both times they decided no. What was it that prompted Trump to go ahead with it?
Right. So this started when. So I was gonna let me go back a little bit. So I was watching David Pacman, and I'm gonna get to that's a good segue to your question. And he was saying, like, look, Trump wants to go to war with Iran, and this is all an excuse. The people that did the attack on embassy, which I'll get to, they were not Iranians. These were Iraqis. So this was not Iran. Even though they were Iraqi citizens, Trump is blaming Iran. So this showed to me that David Pacman had no idea what he's talking about, because all of Iran's influence around the Middle East happens through people that are not Iranian citizens. From around 300 terrorist attacks, recorded terrorist attacks that Iran is responsible for, less than 6 of them have been done by Iranian civilians, right? And in fact, Iran want to make sure that it's done by civilians of other countries, because there's this hidden agreement between Iran and the United States before recently, that as long as I'm using my proxies, we're not going to go to full-on conflict.
Well, and also there's plausible deniability, right? You can just say it's not us, man. It's freaking Iraqi.
Yeah.
What are you asking for?
Yeah, so back at home, they're like, oh, these are our proxies because they want to look strong. But then you go to international world, like, and you say, like, ooh, not us. These are the Iraqi people. Yeah. But again, most of these citizens are Iraqi, Syrian, Lebanese, or Houthis in Yemen. They're not they're not Iranian citizens, right? And again, neither Iran's government or United States government wants to go to war, but they both enjoy poking at each other because it's just so beneficial, both politically and financially. They both benefit from poking at each other, but they won't benefit if they go into full-on conflict. There are other people that benefit from that. The military industry lobbyists, and back in Iran, there are some people that benefit from that. So they are trying to push their government to go to full-on conflict, but the governments themselves, neither of them want to go to full-on war with each other, right? It's suicidal for Iran and extremely costly for the United States, right? Both politically and financially, right? So but how we got to that embassy attack that David Pacman said it had nothing to do with Iran, which was absolutely such a bad take. The first, what happened was some of the proxies of Iran in Iraq killed a contractor who allegedly was an American citizen, right? And in response to that, United States attacked a bunch of Iranian proxies and took out a whole bunch of their officers, right? And again, so far, this is normal, right?
Yeah.
Actually, no. This was a bit of an escalation, because even when Iran uses its proxy to attack United States interests, it doesn't actually kill American civilians or any soldiers, right? So Iranian proxies versus U.S. interests, that was the norm, right? It kept on happening. But then you have not an American soldier, an American civilian killed. This is a bit step up. So then United States responded by killing a bunch of proxies of Iran, including high officers. And now Iran again. So a lot of people are saying Trump keep escalating it, but if you look at the sequence of events, it was Iran that was keep escalating things to a new norm, because Iran uses proxy for an attack on the embassy in Baghdad. And what you have to understand is that an embassy of a country that's U.S. soil. Any country's embassy in another country is part of their country. It's part of your United. Like if Brazil have it as an embassy in Tehran, that's part of Brazilian soil. That's their country, right? So this is when you attack the U.S. embassy, that was an assault on U.S. soil. That was a whole new level of escalation, and also it was deja vu on two different levels. It was deja vu because it brought back memories of the
Benghazi
major event back in 1979, right after the Islamic Revolution, of the takeover of United States Embassy in Tehran. And that's a whole other chapter that we could get into. The one that had 52 hostages of Americans back in the embassy. That was 40 years ago. Yeah. But also more recently, the attack on United States embassy in Libya, and the failure of Clinton to protect their ambassador, which Trump said that we will never fail. Like Trump promised that, if he's in power, they would never fail that big, and he would protect his ambassador. The Libya embassy would never be repeated. So if you look at the situation that the Trump administration was in, the response to that had to be extremely strong. This was an attack on United States Embassy, okay?
And a potential attack on civilians. You're not, embassy is full of civilians. So if those protesters, at a point, those protesters were basically between, there was only like a pane of glass that was separating civilians and the protesters. So if they got through, who knows? You can't really control an angry mob at that point.
Yeah, and actually the fact that they even managed to get close to that embassy is another thing, because this proved our point. A lot of people came out and said we were exaggerating the influence of Iran's over Iraqi government, but then the CIA documents were leaked and we were proven right. But then this happened. Yeah. The green zone, which the embassy of United States is in Baghdad, it's like a fortress that nobody could infiltrate. Like even a fly couldn't get in there without having the right paperwork and pass, right? This was one of the most, no, it wasn't one of the most, it was the most secured embassy, period. Like Americans working at this embassy, even though they were in Baghdad, they probably felt safer than being in New York. That's how safe this place was, right? But on the day that the Iranian proxies wanted to storm the embassy, all the security stood down. And these people just walked right in. That showed how much the Iraqi government is loyal to Iran. Like they all just stood down. And imagine you being an American and working in this embassy and feeling so safe. And then you wake up and the next day you see like these people are just right on the, like there was this video that the only thing that was separating the protesters and the people that were working there was just a glass. Yeah. It just looked extremely scary.
And the people that are defending you, they just like walk away. These guys saying, what the fuck?
Right. So that needed to. So if put yourself in the position of Trump, the Trump administration, if you didn't, Iran had gotten away with a lot of poking with any response from the United States for a
See,
while.
that's
Right?
an important point.
Right.
I think we should stay on this point for a second, because that's an important point which I've heard basically no one make, apart from you and a couple of other people, that what had happened in the last year, if you look throughout 2019, Iran has done these little things over and over again, whether it's attacking tankers in the Persian Gulf, whether it's taking down a US drone, whether it's, attacking
ships.
US bases all over the place. And every time shit like this happened, Trump goes online and he says, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. There's a lot of like saber rattling.
Right.
He doesn't do anything. So, Iran could have been forgiven for thinking that, all right, this guy is all talk. He's just going to talk a lot. He's going to go on Twitter. He's going to, he's going to bust a nerve, but he's not really going to do anything. So
they didn't just think that, they said it.
Oh, really?
So they said it when Trump came on Twitter and said, like, we're going to have a strong response.
Right.
They're like, yeah, sure. They openly mocked him.
Yeah.
For just they said you are not going to do shit. Like Trump had become famous among Iranian officials for a guy that just talks but does nothing, right? And they thought they're going to be able to get away with anything. And all of a sudden, Trump went from zero doing like no response to taking the second most influential person in the country. Yeah. Like, this was a huge shock, a surprise to the Iranian government. They're like, holy shit. They did not expect that, right? And I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories that, Soleimani was sent as a sacrifice to the United States. I don't believe that nonsense. This came as a shock to you, even though I'm going to tell you how it started benefiting Iran, that they took out Soleimani, but at first it came as a shock to them, right? But again, if you're the Trump administration, you have to think, they attack your embassy. If you don't respond, that's going to be the most pathetic thing. Like, you're going to look extremely weak. They attack your goddamn embassy, right? But the Trump administration needed to come up with a response that is so significant that would be fitting response to an attack on embassy, but not strong enough to start a full-on war.
Right. And
you have to understand that Trump's base is very different from other Republicans. A lot of people think Trump wants full-on collision. Trump, if there's one thing that Trump recognizes, is his base. Okay, Trump's base he could get away with doing so many crazy things, and they will still be loyal to him. But they have their red lines. Even Trump's base, even though, like, they say he could shoot somebody in the middle of the street, they will still be loyal to him. But there's something that they would not forgive, and that's this. Getting involved in more wars in the Middle East. That this is something that they want, a promise that they're going to hold him to account. They could even forgive him for not building.
That's all of Trump's base, though. Do you reckon that's a majority of Trump's base, though? Because he came into power with the platform that I'm going to end all these endless wars. I'm going to get us out of these places. But then he surrounds himself with people like John Bolton that are pretty much war hawks if you look at their track record. And then you have people like Ben Shapiro, who over and over emphasizes that it's very important for the United States to be the policeman of the world, that we need to be out there, we need to be stopping all the bad guys everywhere, and we need to be the force of light, whatever. That's what he always says. So do you think that's a majority of his base, or do you think that's just a loud sort of libertarian?
Well, we don't have to really guess, because we saw what happened when Trump decided to attack the airbase in Syria in response to Assad's gassing. Like, that was something so he thought this is something like he could do, because there were images of children being gassed, and it just looked so heartbreaking. And he said, we need to do something, and he did it. And his base turned on him hard, right? Some of his most loyal fans just were extremely upset. This was their red line. This was their red line, and he saw it, right? So again, Trump's base is not like Trump's Republicans are different kind of Republicans than Bush's Republicans, right? These are not your typical neocons, right? So they don't want Trump to get it. So honestly, if you think about it, taking out Soleimani looks like a very good decision. Like, look, we could hurt Iran so hard, and we're not military attacking Iran at all. And this is outside Iran's borders as well, right?
Right.
So it seems like a great idea at the time. The problem is, though, that it's on Iraqi. It seems like nobody cares what the Iraqi government thinks, right? Iraqi government is like, hey, you guys recognize that this is our country, right? Like, you guys are just attacking each other. But we get to Iraqi government later, because one thing that everybody is asking, like, oh, what do Iranian people think, or what do American thinks, or what is the Iranian government going to do, or what is the American government going to do? But nobody is asking, like, I mean, not many people are asking, wait, what about the Iraqi people, right? This is their country has been turned into a chessboard between two powers, and they have apparently zero say in who uses their country as a battleground. But we'll get.
That's true.
Do you hear the background? I hope this is not bothering you.
No, not at all. I can't hear anything else. Other than
right. So good. So they took out Soleimani, and what happened? Okay, so what happened? Now Iran was in the same position as the United States. Now they had to. You just took out person number 2 in the country. They had to have a strong response, extremely strong response, or else they're going to look pathetic and weak to their base. But they also don't want to go to a full-on war with the United States, because that would be suicidal. And when the news first came out, I was actually live on air with the Apostate Prophet when it happened. And I could not believe the news, because the original fake news that came out was that Americans, 80 Americans were killed. And, the IRGC, the Islamic Republic Guard Corps in Iran, the Sepai Post Iran, they are usually very strategic. They're patient, they're strategic. I mean, think about the fact that with the limited resources that they have managed to build a semi-empire in the Middle East. These people know what they're doing. They have outmaneuvered Israel. They have outmaneuvered Saudi Arabia. They have outmaneuvered the United States in many strategic places. So for them to go out and take a whole bunch of American soldiers, I was like, what the hell? Are these people suicidal? It just seems so wrong. I did not think they would do this, and I'm shocked that they would do it. But then later on, the story came out that they actually leaked out information that they're going to attack the base, so that Americans could pull out their soldiers, so that no Americans would die, because they're not suicidal. They don't want to go on to full-on war with the United States, right? And honestly, it still looks a little bit pathetic, because obviously it was leaked to everybody else that they did this. So they you don't. But the news at home was like, oh, we did actually kill. They spread the fake news that we did actually kill Americans, but they also told the Americans, look, can we just stop it here? Like you could tell, you could go home and say, no Americans were killed, and it seems like Iran is going to stop, and we could go home and we could we showed the evil Americans that we had the revenge, and we could just end it right here, right? And I think at that time it seemed like Trump was looking happy, we took out their number 2, and in response we didn't lose a single American, and Iran was kind of happy as well. They were like, look, Soleimani's death seems to be even more valuable than him living, because for the first time, and now for me to explain this, we need a little bit of more history, let's say. But even older history, right? So first, we talked about what happened 40 years ago in Iran, but let's now talk about what happened 1,400 years ago in Iran, right? So 1,400 years ago, the Arabs showed up at the gates of major cities in Iran and decided that Iran is going to be part of the land of Islam. And they won, and they raped and killed and burned books and toppled buildings, and they massacred a whole bunch of people, and they took over Iran, and Iran has ever since became Islamic. And a lot of Iranians have ever since been extremely racist against Arabs, right? Extremely racist against Arabs, right? There are many, many Iranians that have promised that one day they're going to take revenge. This is something that happened 1,400 years ago. And a lot of Iranians think that the glorious Persian Empire, the Iranian culture, everything that makes Iran was like ruined by this barbaric Arab desert dwelling,
Interesting.
cow urine drinking, they like people that came and ruined their country, right? This is again, if you think that like this is why a lot of white people think that they have a monopoly over racism. They haven't seen racism, right? Most of the planet is actually more racist than Western Europe.
I tell people, man, come to Asia. We'll show you real shit.
We show you real racism. So there are many Iranians. Again, a lot of Iranians hate it when I say this, but this is reality. A lot of Iranians think that the only good Arab is a dead Arab. Like they say that, right? They openly say that. And a lot of Iranians think that if you're Muslim, you're a traitor.
Really? In Iran, they say that.
Yeah, because they think like the Arab religion is a foreign intervention in Iran. This is a foreign ideology. They say the Islam is the religion of the Arabs, is a barbaric religion that is only fitting to the barbaric Arabs. They say that the Persians are the Aryan race,
right?
And the only fitting religion to such a glorious race, to the glorious Persian Empire, is the Zoroastrian religion, right? You know what my name actually means, Armin? What? Armin means the guardian of the Aryan land. That's what my name means. Yeah. In fact, the word Iran, do you know what Iran means? No. Iran means the Aryan land.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So this is the mentality that a lot of people have. In fact, when I was a child in Iran, when I grew up, I lived most of my life in Iran, and when I was growing up there, and my simplistic understanding of society around me, and this was a simplistic understanding, was that we're two camps in Iran. We have the religious people that are pro-government, and we have the nationalist, more patriotic type that are either don't care about religion or hate Islam passionately, right?
Interesting.
But they're mostly interested in this romanticized pre-Islamic, Iran. They have like the Ahura Mazda necklaces. They have a Shahnameh in their home instead of a Quran.
Wow.
They love this pre-Islamic history and on all they go visit the historical sites in Iran, all that stuff, right? So
how big is that camp, do you reckon?
It's big. I mean, it's big, and I grew up in that camp. Like that was my environment of all the people that hated the mullahs, okay, so they all hated the mullahs. Some of them hated Islam as a whole. Some of them didn't say that it wasn't that anti-Islam, but they weren't practicing Muslim in any way.
There's a question from Kiki as well as a super chat. Thanks for the super chat, Kiki. He's like, are there many closet Zoroastrians in Iran?
So again, there's actual Zoroastrians and something I refer to new Zoroastrians, right? So the actual Zoroastrians, they have their own little clubs and they do their own like religious thing. But then you have all these.
Can they do that in the open? I'm sorry to butt in, but can they do that in the open?
Yes, because they were born Zoroastrian. If they were born Muslim, they can become Zoroastrian, right? Because that's punishable by death to leave Islam. In Iran you have churches, you have Zoroastrian temples, you have synagogues for Jews. If you're born, you do. If you're born a Jew, you can practice. You can't just. You can't advertise it though.
I see.
You can go practice your religion. You can have your own synagogue, but you can't go tell people to become Christian. That's punishable by death. You can just practice your Christianity in your church. That's fine.
Okay.
You can't have a crossing open. That's not allowed.
Right.
And Zoroastrians,
can you have the Ahura Mazda necklace in open?
Well, but this is what I'm saying. A lot of non-Zoroastrian people are wannabe Zoroastrians, right? That my mom had Ahura Mazda symbolism is everywhere, right? Because that's something that is adored. Like my mom always had it. She doesn't even consider herself. A lot of people that don't even consider themselves Zoroastrians are in love with Zoroastrian symbols because it's still a symbol of pre-Islamic, glorious Persian Empire, right? But there's also a whole bunch of people that are recently Zoroastrian converts that are separate from the actual people that are Zoroastrians, and they don't usually get along that much because the people that are born Zoroastrian and just practicing their religion in their own like temples and stuff, they're not very political. They're just like religious, but they're own, this is just a cultural thing for them. And all these new Zoroastrians, they're becoming Zoroastrian with a political agenda. And there's these people that are just born Zoroastrians. They're kind of scared because they're like, they don't want the government to come down on them. They're like, you guys just go do your political stuff somewhere else. Like, leave us alone, right? But so these are, and a lot of these people that actually call themselves Zoroastrian now, they don't know much about Zoroastrianism, right? They just know it's not Islamic. And this is more fitting of my Aryan race than this barbaric Islamic shit, right? So that's what they don't know much about Zoroastrianism, but they call themselves Zoroastrian now, right? So, but okay, so what I said is that this was a simplistic binary thing, but more recently, things have either become more complicated, and there's a gray area in between these two, or it has always been this complicated, and I just didn't see it as a child, right? But now I'm seeing that it's not as binary as it used to be, or it had never been this binary, because I think more recently this has been happening. This is a new thing. There's two things that unite these two camps. There's Shia religious people and the more patriotic, anti-religious, So if you want to simplify it, you could say people that see Islam on top, then Iran, and the people that say no, Iran first, either Islam second or Islam not at all, right? Okay. So, but what unites them is two things: their hatred for Arabs, especially Gulf Arabs, right? So the Shia Muslims, they see the Gulf Arabs as these Sunnis, right? And their source of their hatred for them is that they're Sunni, and it's more of an ideological hatred for them. And the more nationalist, patriotic types, their hatred for Arabs is more of a racist nature, right? More of a race war thing, right? But when Iran's government takes positions against Saudi Arabia and humiliates Saudi Arabia, they both like it, right? It kind of makes them both a little bit enjoy it a little bit, right? So that's something that unites. Again, this is not a general term. Like, when I say like unite some of these people with each other, there are a whole bunch of people that do not see eye to eye with the religious people at all. Like, there are also millions of people that would want to see every single mullah dead in Iran, right? There are also a lot of people. So nothing I say is unanimous. Every time somebody comes and says that, what do the Iranian people think? I always respond like, which ones, right? Because there's so many different answers to that question.
Opinion, of course,
yeah. But what I'm talking about is not a general thing. I'm talking about there seems to be some gray area in between where some people are not either or. So some people enjoy, even though they hate Islam, they hate the mullahs, they take pride in their government showing it to the Saudis, right?
So in that sense, was there support from like the non-mullah related Iranians for Soleimani, like that Soleimani was out there showing the Arabs their place, right?
This is what I'm trying to get to eventually. That how Soleimani's death became a unifying factor for a very short amount of time. So that's one element, and the second element that unites these two camps with each other is their desire for a semi-empire, right? So if you look at the places in the Middle East where it's majority Shia and where Iran's government is using to spread its influence, it's it's almost the same as the places where the Sassanid Empire before its fall to the Arabs, those are exactly the same place where Iran was during the Sassanid Empire, right? So, and the Iranians that want Iran to go back to its former glory, they're looking at this Islamic Republic, they're looking at the Khamenei's, dominance around the region, and they're looking at it as if it looks kind of like he's bringing back the glory and the power and the force of, the previous Persian Empire.
Yeah.
So they're like, they kind of like this kicking ass kind of looking, like becoming some of these people are now willing, even though they hate Islam, are willing to look past that these people are religious because of the victories and the amount of power and influence they're bringing in the region, right? This is something that they wanted to see, and they never thought they're going to see it in their lifetime, but now they feel like there's something similar to it is happening. Some of them are going as far as, and this is ridiculous, I know, but they go as far as like, you know what, Shia Islam is not even Islam. We Iranians are so resistant to Islam, and we are so allergic to Islam in our DNA. Our race could not accept Islam. So instead of accepting Islam, which is the true Islam, is Sunni Islam, we just created a different thing, and we're like, well, we'll just take this instead.
We just created an Iranian version of it.
An Iranian version of Islam, and they said to prove that, they're like, look, Shia Islam is hidden Zoroastrianism. Look at all these different. So they're trying to come up with excuses for the Shia government that, you know what, maybe these are not real Muslims anyways, right? Real Muslims, some of their lines are like, real Muslims are ISIS and Al Qaeda. That's the true Islam, right? So we're not really Muslims. So that's what they're saying.
So in Iran, sorry, finish your point. Sorry, go on.
No. But so when Soleimani died, right, for a very short amount of time, it seemed like it could look like a illusion of unity because it seemed like a lot of people that Soleimani in Iran managed to inspire. Here's the thing: Soleimani was either hated by Iranians or loved. There's not that many people that were in the middle with this guy, right? Either this guy is a full evil terrorist, Thanos himself, or he was a hero, the guardian of Iran. And the only reason why ISIS is not raping every single Iranian woman as we speak right now is because Soleimani protected Iranian civilians against ISIS, right? It's either one of these two. It's nothing in between, right? So, even though a lot of Iranians hate Soleimani, the Iranians that hated Soleimani and called him a child killer, by the way, a lot of Syrians call him the child killer, right? Which he is. But a lot of these Iranians that hated Soleimani were shocked by the number of people that came out for his funeral, and also the type of people that came out for his funeral. Because a lot of religious type people came out, but a lot of non-religious type people also came out.
Interesting.
And a lot of anti-Soleimani, anti-government Iranians tried to excuse the large number of people that came out, but the government is forcing them. The government always forces people to come out. But the problem is that these numbers were way too high to be justified by just the government pulling out people, because the government has done this attempt of getting people out in the streets for the protests that they like all the time, but the numbers have never been this high. It was unbelievable. The only time that this many people showed up in the streets in Iran was around 30 years ago when Khomeini died, right? So this was unbelievable, and it looked like it was such a great PR after the recent protests in Iran. It seemed like the right medicine for Iran, because Iran was looking like really divided. It looked like people hated the government. It seemed like people want this government to go away. And all of a sudden you had crowd much, much bigger than the protest coming out in defense of Soleimani. And Iran was just loving it. It was just loving it, and it had such a huge PR. And look, because remember, Iran really cares about this image. Iran needs this. The reason why Iran cares about this image is because it needs to look like a Shia heaven for Shias outside of Iran. Because for Shias outside of Iran to be loyal to Khamenei, you can't look like a government that is oppressing its own people, right? So, and the narrative to Shias outside of Iran is that these protesters are just puppets of the Westerners and Zionists, and they're just a minority, and everything is glorious and amazing in Iran, right? And if only Khamenei could also rule over Syria and Iraq and Lebanon, it would just be as great as it is in Iran, right? So all of a sudden, these people that came for Soleimani out on these large numbers seem to justify that. Like, look, these are the true Iranian people that are sad that Soleimani was killed. It was fantastic. And then, Islamic Republic were great. This seems like another gift that United States just gave to us, until just 2 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago, 4 days ago, I think, when Iran did they shot themselves in the foot. So I think they were planning on reaping all the benefits from Soleimani's death for months to come. Right. I think they were gonna go Soleimani for so many days, like Soleimani pictures everywhere in the country. Constantly in schools. My God, they were making the kids cry. They were making the kids. It's so heartbreaking. Like, the brainwashing was on a high level. Yeah. But I think they were planning to use this for a very, very long time. They were like, nobody's talking about the protests anymore. Everybody's talking about Soleimani. This is fantastic. But then two things happened: the stampedes, and a whole bunch of Iranians died in the funerals for Soleimani. So many Iranian civilians died. I think around 80. But then they shot down a plane. Okay, they shot down their plane with, like, the Iranian government, because they were on high alert. It seemed like, okay, by the way, this is our latest understanding. If the news changes tomorrow, we're just going by what seems to be the most likely explanation. Has been that a Ukrainian plane from Tehran's airport was shot down by Iranian forces themselves, because they thought it might be the United States cruise missiles attacking, right? So the whole country was on high alert, and they panicked, and they shut down a plane full of Iranian citizens. And that's the fact that they took down the plane of the Iranian citizens. So that brought the numbers of, like, citizens, Iranian civilians dying by the hand of the Iranian government because of negligence by the Iranian government themselves, to around, I think, 130. So it seemed like, okay, Americans killed one guy, Soleimani, and it seemed like we just can't stop killing our own civilians left and right in response. Like the great revenge. Apparently, the great revenge of the Islamic Republic to United States was to kill 0 Americans and more than 130 Iranian civilians. Like, please stop revenging against the United States, because you seem to be killing your own people left and right. But all of that angered people, but that was not the main reason why now, today, as we speak, people are back in the streets against the Islamic Republic. So the Soleimani honeymoon is over. People are back in the streets against the government. But there was
a question about that as well. Like, what do you make of the recent protests that have begun again? Are they legit?
Yeah, but yes, they're bigger now than they're not as big as the Soleimani funerals, but they're bigger than the previous anti-government protests, because it seemed like the previous anti-government protests were around more than 1,000 people were killed by the government. That seemed like it's going to make the people not protest for a while, because that was such a brutal crackdown. But now they're back in the street. Like, this is the protests against the Islamic Republic by the people are happening more frequently than before. And I always say, remember, for this government to fall, for this government to stay in power, every time there's a protest against the government, each one of these protests, the government has to be the winner. But for the government to be toppled, the people have to just win one time, right? And one thing that a lot of people that mention that, look, the size of the people that came out for Soleimani is much bigger than the people that are protesting against the government. But because they're allowed. Nobody's shooting at the Soleimani. Like, nobody's shooting. Like, when you come out for funerals for Soleimani, nobody's shooting at you. You're not going to get arrested. Okay, imagine the size of the people protesting against the government if it was allowed, and if you could get away with it, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing: if anybody I'm not claiming I know which side is bigger. Both sides claim to have the majority on their side.
Right.
Both sides claim that so the pro-government people are saying that the anti-government people are just a fraction, small, tiny fringe,
Right.
and most people are for the government. And also the anti-government people say that most people that are for the government are just this tiny fringe group, and almost every other Iranian wants this more or less to go.
Right.
I mean, they're both speaking out of their asses because both of them don't know, and who knows? Nobody knows because there's no reliable polling. There's a lot of people rely on Twitter polls. Really, Twitter polls? Do you know how unscientific that is? Do you know? And then you put Twitter polls and you want to see, oh, how many of you want this government to fall? Well, your followers are, and if your followers are mostly anti-government, of course I'm going to see what the poll is going to be for.
Yep.
Like, anyways, so but anybody that claims that this is what the Iranian people want, anybody that says anything like that, they're just talking out of their ass. Nobody knows what the numbers are like. I mean, you could guess, and if you're guessing, that's fine. But just make sure that you're saying that this is just a guess, right? Right? Don't claim that this is, your personal, like a lot of people that come out of Iran and they're living like in Western countries and stuff. They're like, oh no, Iranian people, they hate Islam, they hate the mullahs.
Right.
It's just the government. But they're judging everything based on the social bubbles that they just lived in. And they think like their personal experience in their life just represents their own entire country. Anyways, but so now we have a situation where people. So this is what I was getting at. The protesters in the street right now. The thing that made them angry the most was not just the negligence that killed a whole bunch of people in the funerals, all because of the stampede, not just the negligence of the military shooting down a plane full of their own citizens. By mistake, and not just by mistake. Not if they were expecting attacks, they should have had no planes in the sky anyways, right? The standard procedure is
the point that people are making. Yeah, like you
the
shut
standard
down
procedure is like, why were there civilians planes flying in there? They should have all been standing down. But that's not even it. Even that is not the reason why people are angry. The real reason is that they try to hide it. Okay, they try to lie to people. They were shutting people left and right. They were trying to silence people. They tried to destroy the black box. They took bulldozers. They tried to bulldoze the entire area that the airplane had crashed. They were trying to do everything to lie to the people and get away with saying that hide the fact that they shot down their own plane. And eventually they gave in. The reason why they gave in was because of the pressures from Canada and Ukraine, right? And unfortunately, not from there was Afghan civilians. So there were Canadian civilians there. There were Afghan civilians there. There were some Iranian civilians, many Iranian civilians there, and Ukrainians, right? And that international pressure and the fact that they had evidence. Like, look, we have images. We have military. We have images of a missile hitting the plane. Like, there's undeniable. You guys better stop this. You cannot get away with this. And they came out and they admitted this. And the Iranian people are saying, look, if there was like, it's Canada and Ukraine. If it wasn't because of them, these people would have not told us this.
Yeah.
Like, how many other lies has our government gotten away with this because it was no pressure from the international community? Yeah. How come there is no funerals for these people? How come Soleimani, millions of dollars were spent on his funeral, but nobody, these civilians, these people that were killed by our own, who should we be fearing more? United States that killed a terrorist like Soleimani, or our own government who killed, he seems to try to hide the fact that they killed their own civilians, right? And then the fact that they try to hide this, and the fact that Trudeau came out and these are the Canadian citizens on the plane were Iranian Canadians, right? And Trudeau, again, I know a lot of people in your live chat probably hate Trudeau, but to a lot of Iranian people, it seemed like this guy was desperate for answers for Canadian citizens. These were Iranian Canadians,
right?
But it seemed like they matter to Canadians, and they're like, why do we matter to our government? Why is it that these Iranian Canadians matter so much to the Canadian government, But the Iranians that didn't have dual citizenship, the Iranians that were just Iranians, their government, the Iranian government, not only is not standing up for them, not only they were not willing to go and get answers like who killed these Iranians, who's responsible for pulling the missile. No, they wanted to hide, instead of holding people responsible who were responsible for this, instead of demanding answers, they were trying to hide it. And like, look, you guys don't care about us. Why can't you care about us the way Trudeau cares about Canadians? Right? What is there? What they're saying is their blood more colorful? That's a saying in Iran, right? So like, why is it that having a Canadian passport all of a sudden makes you more valuable? Makes you, the whole world cares about you, but if you're just an Iranian citizen, nobody seems to care about you, not even your own government, right? And that's what makes the people angry. People are like, okay, you care about Soleimani, but you don't care about the civilians, right? And that's what's boiling their blood. Like, they are angry. And the honeymoon is over. The whole sense of unity that Iran was trying to portray, like it was looking good for Iran for a while. And I actually, before the plane shut down and before the stampede, I put out a tweet out there, and I thought this illusion of unity that exists, I said that's going to be short-lived, because even without the plane shooting and without the stampede, I said all this PR, even though it might look like people are united for Soleimani, the sources of division is not going to go away. These PR moves is not going to put food on people's plates, which is it's not going to stop the tribal divisions between the Kurds and the government, the Turks and the government.
I think that's an important point as well, because the economy is still struggling under the sanctions, or whatever you might want to call it. The economy is still struggling. So if it was the case that you have this glorious Islamic Republic whose economy is thriving, maybe you could sustain that. But without people having access to a proper economic development, proper money, they're not able to take care of their families. Religion can only take you so far.
Right. I mean, if you lose everything,
there's
not that much that the government could threaten you with, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like we have nothing else to lose. We might as well go try and. So, like, I was watching this speech from this father that his son died in one of these protests. His son was shot by, and he was saying, like, the government people reached out to me, and they threatened me to stop speaking, to not, because they killed his son, because his son was in the middle of the protest, and he said, like, they threatened me to not say anything in defense of my son, and he was saying, what are they going to threaten me with? They killed my son. I have nothing else to lose. What are you going to take from me? He said, I have nothing. He said, my life is over. He was talking to foreign press, to people like if you're going to kill me, come kill me. This is my address. Here's where I live. He said, you took everything that I care about from me. Come and kill me. This is my address. There's nothing you could scare me with. And it just broke my heart. And, and people are like the people, again, people that are against the Islamic Republic, they are so done with it. Like the ones that want this government to topple, they're willing to pay. Some of these people are willing to pay any price to just see this government fall, right? And then they are paying it. They are paying it with their lives. But again, there are so many different sides to this. There was
an interesting question in the super chat that I want to just take with you. Shashidharan was asking, now that Iran has taken down this Ukrainian plane, and all these countries are upset about it, should the EU also think about pulling out of the nuclear deal? And do you think they might actually do it?
Well, I mean, so the nuclear deal. The problem with the nuclear deal was that that it was written in a way that it looks really bad if you pull out of it without Iran doing anything against the deal. Like Iran was upholding all of the side of its deal, right? So United States pulling out of that deal was such a gift to Iran, because they could Iran looked like, so the whole point of the deal was for Iran to signal to the world, like, look, I'm playing to play ball and be friendly with everybody, right? But we're willing to give up uranium enrichment and all of that. By United States pulling out of that deal, Iran's managed to okay, we can now go back to enriching uranium and still look like we're the good guys, right?
You have your cake and you eat it too.
So we can get both of this thing. We can okay, we didn't pull out of the deal. They got we were upholding everything on the deal. They pulled out under something that they agreed to.
Yeah.
And we don't have to. So we look good internationally, and we could do what we want now. Especially now, they're saying, but after killing of Soleimani, they're saying you know what? Maybe we should completely say it to everything remaining from the deal as well, right? Because before they were just threatening, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do a little bit more of this. But now that they killed Soleimani, their now arguments are maybe we're going to pull out completely. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Let me ask you this. There was, let's come to some of the takes that people have got going on around this as well, because we've talked about the situation in Iran. We've talked about how important Soleimani was to the Iranian regime. We've talked about how people view Soleimani, for different reasons. People have different feelings about Soleimani, and people that might have very divergent cultural viewpoints and religious viewpoints also support Soleimani because of the sort of empire building mindset that they have in the back of their heads. So we've seen, and you were talking about this on your own podcast, Secular Jihadists, that some of the takes from the commentators on the Iran-US conflict and whatever's happened there have been pretty appalling. And that's something that I've noticed as well. We were talking offline about how we try to consume content from sort of both sides of the aisle so we get an idea of what they're both saying so we can make up our own minds. But one of the things that I've been getting from sort of the more liberal commentators is almost like this apologetic attitude towards Iran. Iran, we're so sorry. You're so nice and we hurt your feelings. We're so sorry. Please forgive us, Iran. Obviously celebrities you can't take seriously, and I don't, so we're not going to talk about them. But, some of the commentators, they come out and they're like, dude, Soleimani was in Iran on a peace mission. He was trying to broker peace for the Middle East. This was a guy that, defeated ISIS. He was the good guy in all this. Why did you kill the good guy? And I'm thinking to myself, do you actually sit there with so many hundreds of thousands of subscribers and you're thinking to yourself, this is a good guy and he's fighting ISIS because he's just such a nice guy? They're not fighting ISIS for some altruistic reason. You see their track record in the region for the past, so many decades. They're trying to build, they're trying to remove sort of Sunni supremacy in the Middle East with Shia supremacy. That's what they're trying to build. And it's strange to me that people either don't see it or are deliberately ignoring it. Which one do you think it is?
Well, I don't know but I could just criticize what they're saying. I don't know I can't read their minds, so I don't know what their intentions are. But I was watching, one of the people I watched from the left is Kulinski, and he keeps on saying that, he was on a peacekeeping mission. He was he was in Iraq to do peacekeeping. Yeah. Let me just tell you about how, and another thing, exactly, you touched on two of the most important bad takes. This guy was killing ISIS. He defeated ISIS in so many battles and this and that. And why are we against somebody? Why are we kill somebody that is, killing ISIS?
Right.
Well, one thing I remind people of, who else kills ISIS? I mentioned this, I think, to you already.
Yeah.
Al-Qaeda attacks ISIS, right? Yeah. Are we going to celebrate Al-Qaeda because they attack ISIS?
Yeah.
Just because a terrorist.
It's you know what it reminds me of? I don't know if you've ever watched South Park, but there's this South Park episode. I don't know if you watch South Park at all, or if my audience watches it, but there's this South Park episode where New Jersey takes over the whole country and everybody starts dressing up like they're in Jersey Shore, and so the people of South Park hate it, and so they basically take the help of Al-Qaeda in taking down New Jersey, and they're all treating Al-Qaeda like heroes. And I feel like this is like that South Park episode. It's insane.
Right. Yeah, just because one terrorist group attacks another terrorist group, it doesn't make them not a terrorist group, right? So, but another thing, these Soleimani's proxies around the region, they're not anti-ISIS or Al-Qaeda.
Right.
They're anti-Sunni.
Right.
Okay? When Soleimani's proxies around the region, when they went and quote unquote liberated a city from ISIS, every time they liberated a city from ISIS, they would go around and kill Sunni civilians, right? They will burn down their houses. They try to do demographic engineering by moving Shias to Sunni regions, because the more Shia an area is, the more influence they have. If you look at the bombs the missiles that they sent to ISIS, like when they were attacking them with missiles, they would write anti-Sunni stuff on them, not anti-ISIS stuff, not anti-Al-Qaeda stuff, anti-Sunni stuff. They would sing songs against Sunnism. They would curse their Abu Bakr and Omar and Aisha, which is the people that are dear to Sunnis. Like, they are against Sunnism as a whole, where they kill Sunni civilians with the accusation of being ISIS sympathizers. And their only evidence for them being ISIS sympathizers was the fact that they're Sunni, right? So this is the kangaroo courts that they have. I mean, it's tragic. I don't mean to laugh as people's misery. This guy's a terrorist, right? This guy is a terrorist. This guy is responsible for child soldiers, like the Fatimiyun division in Afghanistan, which is a Shia proxy of the IRGC in Afghanistan. They're responsible for thousands of child soldiers dying in Syria and Iraq fighting for Iran. Imagine that. You have child soldiers from Afghanistan dying in Syria and Iraq for Iran.
That's insane.
Okay? Thousands of them, child soldiers. And in Syria, Soleimani was dubbed as the child-killing commander.
Right.
Okay? This guy is a terrorist by every definition of the word, right? So, I mean, just because he's not killing your people, again, this is why I think when somebody like Kulinski comes and says, like, Shias are not the terrorists, it's the Sunnis that are the terrorists, it's the Wahhabis and the Salafis that create Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I think that is racist, because the only terrorism that registers on your radar is terrorism against Westerners. Because if somebody is a terrorist against Sunni civilians of Iraq and Syria, apparently that terrorism doesn't register on your radar.
But
Soleimani is responsible for more civilian deaths in Iraq and Syria, way more than all the Al-Qaeda and ISIS terrorist attacks on Westerners. Less Americans have died in the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda combined than the number of people that Soleimani, this one organization is responsible for, right?
I think the other thing to remember there also is something that I've not heard from a lot of these commentators, whether it's Kyle, whether it's the Young Turks, whether it's Jimmy Dore, all of these sort of progressive, sort of left-leaning commentators, is that you had Al-Qaeda and ISIS that are obviously horrible. Nobody's saying they're not. But what you have with the proxies, with the sort of Shia proxies in the region, is something that Al-Qaeda and ISIS probably didn't have. And you just explained why, because they did not have the full backing of the, of a state's machinery behind them. You said that Saudi Arabia funded, you explained how, like, Saudi Arabia funds these terror organizations, but they can't really exert any measure of control over them. But
so
Iran, on the other hand, can.
Yeah, I mean, the IRGC is not just a military group. These people control industries. They have oil companies. They have infrastructure companies. They build schools. They can build hospitals. They can build offices for, they pay Iraqi politicians. They handpick Iraqi politicians for their influence in Iraq. They used to hide these things, but Nasrallah just in the most recent years comes out, like, the Hezbollah in Lebanon used to deny the fact that they're a puppet of Iran. Now they're not shy about it anymore. They're like, yeah, we owe everything we have and own is because of Iran. As long as Iran has money, we have money. This is just said it openly. Like, they're not. Even just last week, Rouhani came and said that we have no proxies. These are just independent Iraqis and with their own agendas. Like, why are you thinking these are Iranians? And at the same time, the head of the Air Force and IRGC comes out and delivers a speech where the flags of all these proxy groups behind them and speaking on behalf of all of them. Like, it's very like the content, the narratives that the government puts out there for local consumption is very different than the narrative that it puts down for regional consumption, and different from the narrative that it puts out for global consumption. Actually, there's 4 different narratives, right? Another one is for the Sunnis, right? So it's the IRGC is the government in Iran is very clever. Some of them are very clever, right? So the best strategy to use now, they're realizing for the local consumption is to start using more nationalist narratives, right? For the region around them, for the Shia majority areas in the region, the Islamic Republic use Shia symbolism, Shia ideology, Imam Hussein, all that nonsense, and it works. The Shia mythology is so perfect for war and martyrdom and rising up against Sunni oppressors. It just writes itself. For Muslims that are not Shia, the way that the Islamic Republic, to get their sympathy and their support, Iran uses the Palestinian, being the only guardian of the Palestinians. It uses that because the Shia narrative doesn't work on other Muslims. So the Palestinian victimizing Palestinians has done wonders for Iran at trying to sell itself to the non-Shia Muslims in the region, right? So those are the 3 different narratives in the region, and for the global narrative, that's a whole other different ballgame.
Right. What do you there's another very strong case that is being made that I kind of have a lot of time for this take. Some people are making an argument that the time for the United States to get out of this war is around this time now, where sort of the battle against ISIS is coming to a conclusion. It looks like the Syrian government has control of the issue. The whole point why people used to say that the American army needs to be in the Middle East and they need such a massive presence in the Middle East is to defeat ISIS and get rid of ISIS. And now that seems to be the case, it's a good moment for the United States to pull out, get the troops back home. And I feel like that, I don't know what you think about it, but I feel like that the time right now could be a good time to pull out. Or do you feel like the troops need to be there for a longer period?
Well, this is a damned if you do and a damned if you don't situation right now. The truth is the United States should have never been there to begin with, right? Yeah. And now that it's there, it's going to be such a chaotic mess in both scenarios. And I could tell you what the mess in both scenarios is going to be.
Right.
But given that by being there, I don't think now, it's not now that it's a good time. It was always a good time to leave, because nothing has ever become better for them being there. Like, unfortunately, when they leave, as a result of them leaving, there's going to be a whole bunch of nightmare that is going to happen, probably, right? But them staying is also going to become a less but a more prolonged nightmare, right? That is never just going to solve itself. Here's what's the problem with them leaving, right? And this is something that the Iraqi people are divided about, right? And this is also looks like it's such a major win for Iran, because after United States attacked Soleimani wasn't the only person that died. Mohandas, the head of the Kataib al-Hezbollah, was next to him. A whole bunch of other Iraqi were died. And these Iraqi people that died, it's true that they were part of Iran's proxy, but they were also part of Iraqi's legitimate Iraqi military, right? Like they are the part of Iraqi government, and United States is in Iraq with Iraqi's government permission, and they're just now shooting Iraqi military personnel. So this gave such a great excuse for Iran to go to Iraqi parliament and force the Iraqi parliament to hold a vote to remove United States permission to stay in the country. And it looks like it's going to be such a major win, because if United States pulls out of Iraq, the gifting of Iraq to Iran will become 100%, right? Like Iran will have absolute control right after that over Iraq. The problem with the parliament held the vote, and for people that think that this is just a political thing and it's not a religious thing, it's not a sectarian thing, the Sunnis and the court members of the parliament boycotted that vote, and it was only a Shia held parliament, and they voted unanimously. It's so obvious how ideological it is. All the Shia members of the parliament want the Americans to leave and open the door for Iran, and the Sunnis at court are like, please, America, stay here and save us from these crazy Shias, right? So the Sunnis and Kurds want America to stay and Iran to leave, and the Shia members of the parliament are not only they don't want just Iran to stay, they're part of Iran. They're loyal to Iran's government. So getting rid of United States from Iraq is easier than getting rid of Iran, because first of all, it's still very difficult, because even though this government now voted to maybe get rid of United States in Iraq, they really don't have that authority, because the government, the prime minister resigned, and this is now a caretaker government right now, so they can't really kick out the United States. They need to wait for another elected government to be able to officially kick out the United States government. But you can't. A lot of people are saying, well, why are they not kicking out Iran's government? They shut down Soleimani, but then Iran also attacked two United States military base. They took out missiles from Iran in Iraq, and the Iraqi parliament is not angry about that at all, right? But the thing is that even if they wanted to kick out Iran, they can't really kick out Iran, because Iranian citizens are not in Iraq. These are Iraqi citizens that are loyal to Tehran. How are you going to kick out Iraqi citizens out of Iraq? Right? And Iran is right there. They're neighbors. Like, it's a back door. Like, United States is all over there. Iran always says, like, hey, they tell us to leave the region, but you come out from another continent, we're just right there. This is our neighborhood, right? But again, a lot of people are hypocrites. A lot of people on the left, they keep on asking, like, what is the United States doing in Iraq? Why is the United States doing in Iraq? But they never ask, well, what is Iran doing in Iraq? This is not their country either. The Iraqi people are divided on this. A lot of people think like United States should stay, because without United States, either Shias are going to oppress them, or the Sunnis. Again, either ISIS is going to come back, or everything that gave rise to ISIS, even though if ISIS might not be there, all the forces that gave rise to ISIS are all there. All the ideology is still there. All the sectarianism is there. The hate is more than before. And if Iran's influence of Iraq becomes more, the motivation to attack against Shias in Iraq will become, again, more to... You have to remember that ISIS was not a response to the United States. ISIS was more anti-Shia than it was anti-American or anti-Jew, right? This is born out of an anti-Shia agenda than anything else, more than anything else, right? So by Iran dominating the region, it provides more opportunities for these kind of ISIS-like groups to be born again. And just to be clear, that's not something that Iran wants to avoid, or the United States wants to avoid. Both Iran and the United States are in Iraq with the excuse of fighting ISIS, but with different actual agendas. Like, the United States is in Iraq to stop Iran, and Iran is in Iraq because it wants to dominate Iraq and sell everything it has to Iraq. It becomes like a forced exporting hub, right? You know that Iran is like making Iraqi parliament vote with all these trade deals with, like, Iran is like, oh, we have sanctions all over the planet on us, so we have Iraq, and Iraq is just going to buy everything from us because we're voting. They just control all the trade deals. So it just becomes like, and Iraqi people have no say. Like, apparently they have to just buy everything from Iran now. but so you have these Sunnis and Kurds and other people that say, like, okay, if America leaves, we're all fucked. But we have a lot of Shias that say, like, no, we don't. United States should leave, and Iran should stay because they're loyal to Iran. And you have a lot of other Iraqis that they say, how about you both leave and just let us control our own country? Maybe we should have a say in who rules over us instead of you guys deciding for us these things. Maybe give us it. But some people say, like, that's a very genuine. That's the group that I'm most sympathetic to. Like, can people stop treating our country like a battleground and let us? But at the same time, some other people point out that the Iraqis themselves do not yet have the infrastructure or the resources to protect themselves. So if everybody leaves, we don't know if the Iraqi people.
I mean,
are
that's kind of what they're saying about Afghanistan as well, right? Like the US has been there for almost 20 bloody years, but they still don't have the infrastructure there. That once the US gets up and leaves, people that know Afghanistan to say that Taliban's going to turn around and take that country in like 5 years.
Right. But for Iraq, it's going to be Iran that takes over, right?
Yeah.
So I think Iran will provide the security that Iraq needs, but at what cost? At the cost of total velayat faqih Iranian takeover of your country, right? And that is something that the United States is not willing to. I mean, United States is way more than just a Trump administration, right? So even if Trump and the Trump administration wants to completely leave Iraq, that would be such a good campaign thing for them. The United States as a whole, all the technocrats and everybody, they're like, we cannot give this area completely to Iran, right?
Right.
So that's the dilemma that they're facing. But here's the thing.
Sorry, go on. Finish.
No. But there's no right answer to this. Whatever you do is going to be it's going to be messy. It's going to be messy. But again, the United States government, if you have to think about whose interests are you serving, right? If you're trying to serve the interests of American taxpayers, then you need to get out of there yesterday or 10 years ago, right?
Right.
But the truth is that, and this is not a conspiracy theory, a lot of studies show this, lobbyists have a lot more say in what U.S. policy is than voters, right?
Right.
There was a lot of studies that show this, that what lobbyists fund gets, results in more laws than the views of average taxpayers in the United States, right? And lobbyists like war. I mean, it just pays. It's just such a money-making machine. We're not talking about millions of dollars. Yeah. We're not talking about billions of dollars. We're talking about trillions of dollars. Yep. There's nothing more. The oil industry and the military industry, there's nothing that could compete against the power that it has. Yep. And because of those interests, it's just profitable for all sides to just keep on fighting. And Iraqi civilians be damned, American civilians be damned, and Iranian civilians be damned.
Yep. Yeah, I just think it's such a complicated situation, because I was thinking along the lines, all right, what if the US pulls out, but then does what sort of Iran did and support sort of proxies that are opposed to Iran in the region? But the proxies that are opposed to Iran in the region is ISIS. So you gotta do that.
I mean, American did at some point start funding Al-Qaeda groups against Iran, right? Yeah. Didn't know, like they did.
I mean, that's what Obama did, right? Essentially, the rebels that they were funding is the rebels that became ISIS.
Yeah, but also both Obama and CIA under Obama and Trump funded. Yeah. And at some point, they were fighting each other. There are proxies that this is why religion is so powerful. You don't see Iranian proxies fighting each other because they're very clear of the agenda and who's enemy and who's ally. Like that kind of chaotic mess is not going to happen. But when you don't have religious dogma on your side, like when United States and Saudi Arabia throw money and try to create proxies that do their fighting for them, right. All of a sudden, like, oh my God, they're fighting each other now. Like these people are using the guns that we gave them to shoot these people that are using the guns that we paid them as well. Right. Like, what a mess. And Saudi Arabia, like, oh my God, they're actually using the guns that we paid for them to shoot against ourselves. Like, but Iran, again, this is why Iran, even with fraction of the military might of Israel or Saudi Arabia and United States, has managed to be able to do a lot, because they have been very strategic and they have been very ideological. And they have been patient with their, they look at the long term rather than, because, if you have a dictatorship and you don't have to have, you have fake elections that don't really matter, like the president, you don't really have to care about. You're not like the United States that every 4 years you have to give something to the people. You can make longer term plans. You can make 20-year plans or 30-year plans rather than 4-year plans, right? Rather than 2-year plans, right? So you can look at, you can make strategies that make more sense. This is the one benefit of dictatorships, is benefits the dictators. And another thing is that Iran has mastered the art of asymmetric warfare, right? Like they it's easy to cause a lot of chaos. Like, you need a lot of resources and power and military might to maintain stability, but you don't need that much resources to cause chaos, right? I mean, again, like, yeah, United States has a huge military might, but they have spread themselves thin all over the Middle East. So Iran doesn't. If Iran really wants to hurt the United States, again, I'm not saying if Iran and United States go out to war with each other head to head, of course Iran will completely lose and it will be over for Iran. But when it comes to just poking at each other, Iran has a lot to play with, because United States has a lot of expensive toys all around Iran, and Iran doesn't have to come all the way to Washington to hurt United States. It could be like, oh, I'm just going to take this toy you have, expensive toy you have here. I'm going to take this expensive toy you have here. I'm just going to make it very difficult for you to go through the Hormuz Canal. I mean, like, if United States and Iran, for example, go to war with each other, like, Iran could come out and put a whole bunch of mines all over the Hormuz Canal. You know how difficult it's going to be? Like, you just need 2 speedboats and a whole bunch of mines, and you're going to just close the Suez Canal for a week, which is going to collapse the world economy, right? Because how difficult it is to just get those mines out of there, right? But and if United States and Iran go to full-on war with each other, and you topple the government, I don't know how many government sympathizers are in Iran and how many of them are around the region. But these people are not just going to go home and like, oh, I guess the Islamic Republic fell and we have a secular democracy in Iran now, and we just could go home and be like, I guess that's over. No, these people are going to start creating their own Shia militia groups, and they're going to go for revenge. I mean, think about all the nightmare that the world had to deal with after the toppling of Saddam. I mean, the rise of ISIS, all the refugee crisis, the flood of people into Europe. Then you had the Brexit. You had the rise of the alt-right, because in response to the immigration, all of that. You had 20 years of worth of paying the cost of, and all the Syria and falling apart, and the people that died in Syria because of all of that, from removing. When United States attacked Saddam, at first they're like, well, that was easy. They didn't know that they're going to be paying the price for this for the next couple of decades, right? But if you do the same thing to Iran, the cost that United States and the world will be paying is going to be astronomically higher. When United States removed Saddam from power, Saddam was at the weakest it had ever been, right? But Iran's military, even though it's nothing compared to United States military, it's a lot stronger than Saddam's military, and it's right now the strongest it has ever been. It's the strongest.
I feel like not even in terms of like strength per se, but the influence that it has in the region is very strong.
Yeah, it could cause havoc for everybody, right? And I mean, if you think ISIS was scary, imagine the Shia version of that would be like the people that joined ISIS. Well, like a lot of them were just these people, nobodies that just wanted to be part of a Islamic Khalifa. They had never shot a gun. They just went there. They wanted to be terrorists. And like just point and shoot. The first time, like, oh, just put this on your chest and go there and press this button and blow yourself up. But if you remove the Iranian state and now instead of a Shia state, now you have a whole bunch of Shia, stateless Shia terrorist groups all around the region. These people are going to be a lot more funded. They're going to be a lot more organized, and they're going to have a lot more deep roots around the region. And they have a lot more experience fighting in wars. They have these people have years of experience fighting Saddam. They have years of experience fighting with Hezbollah against Israel and winning. They have years of experience fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda, and these people know what they're doing. And now you just remove their head and you just set them loose all around the region. And this is if you're not humanist enough to care about the cost to that in the Middle East itself, to the civilian lives in the Middle East itself, this stuff is not just going to stay home. This is going to be an astronomical cost the whole world has to pay for, right? The whole world will have to pay for it. But at the same time, I think even if the whole world didn't have to pay for it, you should be humane enough to care for civilians in the
Yeah.
Middle East. Yeah,
For sure. And,
yeah.
finally, I wanted to ask, kind of because it takes me to that point as well, what you said, is that a lot of the people, like you have Yashar Ali, you have Karim Sajjadpur, people that have been reporting on Iran for a while, people that know Iran well, they're saying Iran's, the retaliation that Iran did to the killing of Soleimani, it was just a face-saving exercise, sure. And everybody understands that, Iran understands that they needed to do something quickly. They weren't really looking to kill Americans. But what Iran does, and what Iran has been doing for the past couple of decades, and what it's really, really good at, is this kind of sort of proxy soft, warfare.
Right.
And so what people are afraid of, people that know Iran are afraid of, is these kind of strikes. Like, Iran's not going to hit America or Americans directly. They're not stupid enough to do that. But what they're going to do is they're going to use the proxies to take out Americans, so they have that plausible deniability. Do you think that's a real danger that the Trump strike on Soleimani has created?
Well, I mean, until recently, even Iran, when they use its proxies, even if it wasn't Iran itself, it uses proxies against the United States. It wasn't necessary. Most of the time, it was just United States interest. It wasn't like a direct attack on United States soil until recently, which there was an attack on the embassy.
Right.
It was never going to be like ICE, Al Qaeda type, like 9/11 or anything like that. I mean, an Al Qaeda type attack on the United States itself will be suicidal enough. Like, sure. People are going to recognize that this was Iran. Like, even the whole idea, the deniability is not meant to be for the world. Like, that's meant to be for home. That's a narrative that they use at home. Like, look, we're not doing empire building. But right. Even in Iran, they don't believe that. I mean, everybody knows that these are their proxies, so they're not going to be able to get away with that. But just because the more strategic people in Iran are going to try not to escalate things to a place where it doesn't go to a full-out war, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Because just like in the United States, where, like, for example, maybe the Trump administration doesn't want to go to a war, but they might still go to a war because there's a whole bunch of other technocrats and people behind the scene that might just push it to go to a war. In Iran also, the government is just not a unanimous, there's a whole bunch of competing different interest groups in the government that are competing for different stuff. So even if the top people don't want to go to war, when you're playing this dance with another country that, look, we're going to retaliate strongly, but not strong enough for you to attack us, and they're doing the same thing, you're playing a very dangerous dance that you're getting so close that you might cross the line that is actually going to cause a full-on conflict. And when you're dancing that dangerous dance, the people in your camp that want the war, they might just push things a little bit farther than they were supposed to, or they were told. One small misunderstanding or one small mistake is just good enough to make both sides to go into full-on conflict. So I'm saying that neither side is interested in this, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just might happen because of other interest groups, or just because of human error, right, or a misunderstanding. It's just Iran and United States have never been closer to go to war with each other in the past 40 years. And if it happens, I don't think it would have been intentional, right?
Right.
That's one thing. Another thing I think we need to end, we forgot to respond to, is that whole peacekeeping, Soleimani being in Iraq for peacekeeping, right? So the report that they are relying on is that, remember I mentioned that Saudi Arabia, after the Aramco attack, they recognized that, okay, this shit is getting out of hand. Iran is too powerful for us to attack. We need cash. We need the Vision 2030 to work, for us. We need money, or else, like, we're not going to be able to keep throwing money at every problem that we have forever.
Right.
And we need to submit to it. At first, they were so United Arab Emirates recognized this reality before Saudi Arabia, and they sent their officials to Tehran to start peace. And Saudi Arabia, at first, it was really, really angry. But then after a few weeks, they're like, okay, we need to send our own officials to Tehran. But apparently, if the reports are true, Soleimani was in Iraq to further that Saudi Arabia
Right.
talks, right? So that's
Right.
why it seemed like a peace negotiations and all that. So that sounds great and all,
Yeah.
but you have to understand that this is the
So
peace
it's not a
that
negotiation among equals, right?
yeah, but the peace that Iran is interested in is full-on submission to its
Yes.
empire in the region, right?
Yes.
It's either you submit to us or else, right? So, I mean, if you call that peacekeeping, okay, but that's a peace only to start the next step, which is
Right.
more war on
Yeah.
the new front line. Because, so if you, for example, if the Mongols come take over your country and rape everybody and burn down your libraries and kill everybody and have rivers of blood, and now the war was over, and they look around like, oh, okay, we killed everybody, so now there's no more war. That's a
Right.
we were successful in our peacekeeping operations, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
no, so I mean that's an exaggeration, but like, so you attack somebody and you're forcing them to now submit to you. I don't call that really a peace operation. But to make that point very clear, just remember this. So the IRGC, which is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard in Iran, right, is part of the two main military groups in Iran. You have the IRGC and you have the Artesh, right?
Right.
The Artesh is a pre-Islamic revolutionary unit, which existed during Shah's time, during the Pahlavi dynasty. And the IRGC, or the Sepah Pasdaran, was something that Khomeini created to avoid a coup. And that was the mission of the IRGC, was to make sure that the Artesh doesn't start a coup against Khomeini at any point, right? But eventually the influence of the IRGC kept on growing and growing and growing and growing against Khomeini's wishes himself, until the IRGC now reportedly have more than 1/3 of Iran's economy goes through the IRGC, right? They have
Right.
monopolies over many of it. So they're not just an army anymore. They're the most influential army. Plus they control the economy, right? And they have, I think, there's 5 elements to the IRGC.
Right.
You have the Air Force, you have the Ground Force, you have the Navy, you have the Basij, which is like the morality police inside Iran, and you have the Quds Force. The Quds Force is the most controversial part, which the Soleimani was the head of the Quds Force. So Soleimani was not head of the IRGC, he was just a head of the Quds Force. But even though he was not the head of the whole IRGC, he was more important than the head of the IRGC as a whole. Okay, right. So the Quds Force is responsible for the IRGC's operations outside of Iran's borders. Right? It's kind of like the CIA and the military, United States military combined, right? That's its role. And basically the empire building that Khamenei was doing was happening through Soleimani's Quds Force, and all the other proxies of Iran outside was loyal to this branch of the Iranian government. Right. So, but what is Quds? Do you know what Quds means?
No.
Jerusalem.
Oh, I see.
Right? So this organization was named after its final destination. Okay.
Right.
So when you say that Soleimani was on a peacekeeping mission, you have to understand that their final destination, their entire goal is eventually for them to take over Israel.
Right.
And by taking over Israel, I'm talking about genocide of Jewish people all over Israel and bringing Jerusalem back to Islam. Wow. That is their final, and this is not something that globally, like in their propaganda, they would deny, but back in their home, they sing songs about it. Right. They sing like, you know, today this is their whole goal from the very beginning. I mean, even in Iraq, in the Iran-Iraq war, right? There's songs that they sing. The chance that they have is tomorrow we'll take Karbala and they will take Jerusalem, and like that's the entire goal. That's their entire final goal. That's the dream. The dream is eventually the most sensitive places that they want to take, right? Was 3 different areas, right? Ever since the Islamic Revolution, they wanted to take Karbala, right, which is the most holiest place for Shias. And I know a lot of Shias would deny this, but Karbala is holier to Shias than Kaaba itself. Okay? They wanted to take Karbala, bring it back to Iran. They want to take Kaaba and Medina and bring it to Shia So they want to topple the Saudi regime and take over the two holy cities, bring it to the true Islam, and they want to take Jerusalem. These are the holy places. So Mecca, Medina, Karbala, and Jerusalem should come under true Islam, under Iranians Velayat Faqih. And recently they managed to they claim that they have Karbala now because they own the Iraqi government. But these narratives are being challenged right now, both because of the protesters in Iran and the Iraqi protesters in Iraq, who are saying, a lot of the protesters in Iraq want Iran to go back home. They have attacked Iranian consulates in Najaf. In Karbala, there has been, so even in Karbala, people are like the Shia heartland of the world. They have even Shia protesters protesting against Iran's influence in Iraq, right? So you even have that. So these are challenging narratives, and Iran has to play with all of those. And this most recent, attack on the plane and stampede has really, really hurt their narrative. So that's where we are at the moment. And it's changing day by day. So I don't know where we're going to be at tomorrow.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's a very developing situation, obviously, and I think talking to you has been very enlightening in terms of someone that actually knows the situation, somebody that actually knows what the regime is thinking, somebody that knows what the people are thinking, and it kind of helps make a little bit of clarity of some of the hot takes that we've been seeing about the sort of Iran-US conflict as well. So that was good. We better leave it at that, though. But thanks for coming on.
The last super. I just don't want to leave. David gave you a super chat. I want to just answer him. David said, "Ask Armin if the MEK has any support within Iran." From all the opposition groups in Iran, the MEK has the least support. The least support is one of the most hated groups in Iran, and if it's the only group of people in Iran that are more hated than the mullahs themselves.
Wow.
And again, these are some religious nut jobs that have managed to marry. The MEK is the marriage of two ideologies, Islam and communism. So imagine two very ugly parents coming out together, and the monster that comes out of that is the MEK. And also that they have killed a lot of Iranian civilians, and so a lot of Iranians haven't forgotten that. But the MEK has allied with Arabs against Iran. So even the Iranians that hate the government, they hate people because the people that go and ally with Arabs against Iran, that hurts their pride. So they might even anybody that gets money from Saudi Arabia, the MK even united with Saddam against Iran at some point. And as much as people hate the mullahs, that's an unforgivable thing for them. And now they're being funded a lot by Saudi Arabia, and that's unforgivable for a lot of people in Iran. So even though the MEK has the least amount of support in Iran, with the very little support that they have managed to pull a lot of very interesting intelligence leaks from inside Iran. So they have very little support, but the few people that do follow them, they're like, this is a cult. This is a very weird, you can make an entire documentary about the MEK. This is a very, very weird cult, and these are people that will set themselves on fire for the MEK. They will die for the MEK, and they have spies in Iran that is getting. United States has used the MEK a lot to get some very interesting intelligence out of some very high up places in Iran. So yeah,
there was another question I think that's kind of related to this. I can't find the question, but I know who asked it. It was Shri711, and he was asking the people that are dissenting against the mullahs in Iran, what is their plan for if they get rid of the mullahs? What is their plan? Do they want a republic? Do they want a constitutional monarchy? What is it that they want?
So they're divided. Okay. So they a lot of them want a lot of them, it seems to me like a lot of them want a secular democracy, but I don't know if that, because I'm a secularist and I'm an atheist, am I seeing that more because I have a bias?
Sure.
Or is that actually the most people? Because so a lot of people want secular democracy. Some people want to bring back the monarchy, and that is suggested by most of the chants a lot of the chants in the streets against the government seems to be like some pro-monarchy. You can see some pro-monarchy chants like Reza Shah, Ruhat Shah, and some other stuff like that.
Right.
Which seem like people long for bringing back the monarchy. But what the most divisive issue between the people that want to topple the government is that whether or not so what are the Kurds? So a lot of Iranians see Iranian as being Farsi, being Parsi or whatever, right? Being Persian, right? And a lot of them forget that there's a lot of non-Persians in Iran, but they see that the default of being an Iranian as being Persian, right? And it seems like the Turks, Iranian Baluchis, the Iranian Arabs, the Iranian Kurdish people especially, are just like a second-hand thought, and you only start caring about them when the government oppresses them, so that you can use their oppression as a way to be like, oh, look how evil the government is, right? But the reason why there's such a divisive issue is because a lot of these groups might want independence if the current regime falls. And a lot of Iranian patriots are willing the devil to even run the government as long as not another inch of Iranian soil is lost, right? So if you can convince the people that if this government falls, the Kurds or the Turks or the Arabs or the Baluchis are going to try to become independent and separate from Iran, a lot of these people are like, you know what, fuck it, keep the mullahs, right? Even if they hate them, like, if that's the cost, we're not willing to pay it. So, but a lot of other people are saying, oh, no, if we have a secular democracy, the Kurds and the Turks and the Baluch and the Arabs, they would never want to become independent, because now the only reason why they want independence is because we have the mullahs. If we bring secular democracy, they would want to stay with Iran. This is just fear-mongering by the Islamic Republic, that they know that the Iranian people don't want to lose their land. They don't want to see Iran become divided. So they're just fear-mongering so that you support them. Even though you hate them, they're like, look, the alternative is Iran getting cut into 7 pieces. So that they say that this is just fear-mongering. But some people are saying, like, no, there are some actual Kurds that even if you have a secular democracy, they might still want independence, because they wanted, the Kurds wanted to have a Kurdistan ever since World War I. And, they got really, tricked out of that deal ever since. Like, they've been divided over 4 countries, and they've been fucked by all 4 of these countries. So ever since they're like, every chance they get to start independent Kurdistan, they're like, you know what, we don't care who runs us, we need an independent Kurdistan, right? So they're gonna, even if you have a secular democracy, the Kurdish people are like, we're not willing to take a chance. They might still want an independent Kurdistan if the opportunity presents itself.
So is there not that cultural connection between these disparate groups? Because, like, one of the things that India kind of has is like a cultural connection that runs throughout the country. Is that not present between these groups in Iran?
So but it's supposed to be the Persian culture, right? So this is why some Kurdish people are like, wait, why is our unifying factor have to be the Persian culture, right?
I see,
so a lot of people are like, no, we're all one country. And people are like, well, what is it that unifies all of us? They're like, it's the Persian language, it's the Persian culture. Like, Turkish are like, wait, so what unites us is the non-Turkish Persian thing. So they say, like, this is the more proof that you guys see the default of the country to be Persian, right? This is the default of the country. Like, even if we're Turk, we're Persian first, Turk second. And look, some people are like, some Kurdish people are like, what if I just want to be Kurd and I don't want to be Persian? Why is it that our schools teach everything has to be in Persian? What if we want to have schools that everything is just in Kurdish and Turkish, and Persian could be just an optional thing that some people take as elective, right? So those are questions that makes a lot of patriotic even anti-government people nervous, like, oh, you're talking, you're gonna divide my country, you motherfuckers better not talk. Like you better. So see, this is a dividing factor in the country, unfortunately. Yeah, and it's gonna be there. And again, even some people say, even if you say like this is the best case scenario, if you have a secular democracy, some people say there's no guarantee that we're gonna have a secular democracy if this government falls, because whenever there's a vacuum, the next government could be another Shia. It could be another extremist Shia regime, because those are the most organized, the ones with the guns, the ones with the resources, the ones with the money. So let's say this government falls, and all of a sudden we have a power vacuum, and now we have another Shia, more radical Shia government in their place. Like how can you guarantee that that's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, I mean that's what happened in the Arab Spring, kind of in Egypt, right? Like you had the Arab Spring, and then the Muslim Brotherhood took over.
Right.
Yeah. That is interesting. It's going to be interesting how this pans out, and however it pans out, and whatever sort of happens in the future, it'll be good to have you back sometime. To maybe talk about this stuff as well, because it's fun, man. It's always fun to like talk about this stuff with someone who's actually from there and maybe knows a little bit about it and can sort of guide people through some of the hot takes that we see here in the US at least. So this was very enlightening, and thanks for coming on today, mate.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Oh, by the way, can I plug our podcast?
I was just gonna do it, but go ahead. Yeah.
No, you go ahead. You do it.
No, I was just gonna say that I have provided like the links to Armin Navabi's Twitter and his social media in the description. I have his links to the Atheist Republic, and I have his links to the Secular Jihadist podcast. So you can go follow him on Twitter. You can follow the Secular Jihadist podcast on Twitter. You can go subscribe to the YouTube channel, all of that fun stuff, and anything else that you want to put in there.
No, if this is the kind of content for people that are interested in like geopolitics in the Middle East, the Secular Jihadist podcast, both the YouTube channel and the podcast, a lot of our episodes goes deeper into these topics.
Okay, that's perfect.
Maybe we could have one day have you on our Secular Jihadist podcast.
Yeah, man, I love that. Go on.
No, because we had people on that take the, maybe talk about India and Hindutva stuff, because we have had guests that take the other side, like that are against your position. So it would be unfair if we don't represent your side to our audience as well. So I was hoping that maybe you would come on our show and like provide some balance into our take.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love that. And we can talk about this and stuff. And it's funny, but people always tell me that, oh, if you ever go on their show, you guys will just fight. And I'm like, no, we might have disagreements, but at the end of the day, if we're willing to hear each other out, we'll just have a good time.
Yeah, we will fight. It will be a friendly fight. Like I kind of see it's a difference between saying it's a difference between saying like people in a bar fighting or people in your like martial arts class. When you see a fight there, the nature of the fight is completely different. Yeah, they're still fighting against each other, but it's a friendly fight.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm totally up for that. And I'm totally up for those discussions. And, like I was saying before, you had a friend of mine on a little while ago, Kushal Mehra, and I really enjoyed the discussion you guys had. There was a lot of disagreements, but then there was a willingness to hear each other out. And that's, at the end of the day, that's literally the most important thing.
Yeah, and I prefer, honestly, like when people bring these arguments on Twitter, it's harder for me to have these arguments on Twitter. This is much better. Like,
Twitter is not meant to have a discussion. Twitter is meant to have fights. That's what Twitter is for. Twitter is so much fun. Because you can fight with other people. That's the whole point.
Right.
All right, man. Thanks for doing this today, Armin. Again, guys, like, subscribe, share, abuse, do all the fun stuff. Helps the video, helps the channel out. Go follow Armin, go follow the Secular Jihadist, and I'm definitely going to have Armin back sometime, and we'll definitely have more discussions in the future. So other than that, stick around for a second, Armin, while we go offline. But other than that, guys,
bye, guys.
Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.